white paper, and I don't really remember how I got into, I don't remember how I got the white paper, but somehow I got the white paper sent to me because I was in the data center space. Data center background, software and mobile phone background. So really into technology at a very young age. And then 2013, I sent around these messages, and I got some really cool responses, and they became my mentors. So Andreas Antonopoulos, Eric Forries, and these people mean something in my world. They're experts and very knowledgeable. And eventually, Joe Lubin became my mentor. I met John Walperp, who's an IBMer, an ex-IBMer. He tried to come and convince me to come and work for IBM. I can't see your face right now, Anthony, because it had moved over, but...
Don't do it. It's a trap.
That was in 2014 or 15. And then I met Alex Tapscott, and he told me about this, about Joe. Alex and Don Tapscott wrote the book Blockchain Revolution. And so little by little, I got very well connected with people that were in the know about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a whole. And Ethereum became my next best favorite thing. And I think, can I move the slide, Lisa, or?
I believe you no, because it's on my desktop.
Okay.
But
if anybody needs to get in touch with me, these are my contact details. And my Twitter account is still live. So we can move to the next. Yep. So while I was learning about more and more, and I'm still learning, so I think everybody is always learning if you're curious. While I was learning about cryptocurrencies, I came across smart contracts, and about 4 years ago, I started pitching to large film industry people, large IP holders in the film industry about connecting smart contracts to the film industry, content industry. And so I met with Barry Osborne, who's the executive producer of Lord of the Rings, and I met with, just to drop some names.
Fancy people.
And also call them out, because they looked at me like this, like, what is she talking about? So I met with some really talented folks who were very influential in the film industry, and I won't name any more names than that, but some super cool people. And I finally kind of backed off, because I realized that the content world was a very closed world, a very centralized world. And I started really focusing on taking block apps to market. And we signed the first blockchain as a service deal partnership with Microsoft, AWS, Google, and Red Hat, and a long-term agreement in 2017 with the UN. I was also the first person to sign a 6-figure blockchain as a service opportunity with a multinational organization, and we built BHP Billiton's blockchain as a service for track and trace of minerals, a different kind of mining than I was used to. But going forward, we also wrote the spec for the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. If you're not familiar with that, please look them up. They know all things Ethereum, and they do a lot of really good work in the community. We wrote the spec for Enterprise Blockchain, and while we were doing that, the NFT world kind of evolved. So most of you know what non-fungible token is. There's a little more detail here about that. If you really are interested in the details of the different ERC tokens, if you go to my Twitter page, I have pinned vocabulary lists and a GitHub repo on all of the different, you can go down a whole rabbit hole of getting all kinds of information, videos, reading materials, who's who, what people are building, even down to, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the GitHub repo that's posted on my Twitter, then you will come across even legal. So it's a lot of good information, very focused on Ethereum, but also you get a good idea to compare it to different protocols. So if you go to the next slide, Lisa. So back in 2012 and 2013, the color coins were created. And not very many people know about these. I'm an NFT collector. I have a few of these NFTs, and these are called vintage NFTs. And we call them vintage NFTs because they're not easily seen in your wallet of today. And you have to really wrap them in a token if you really want to see them in your wallets. But 9 times out of 10, most people who own these don't really put them online for anything. In fact, they have, believe it or not, they have underground or auctions that are kind of behind closed doors. In fact, with Mint Gold Dust, which is my NFT platform that will be launching at the end of June, beginning of July, we actually have a live auction where we auction these vintage items off because a lot of people don't really know that they exist, actually. The color coins were some of the first, and you can Google the details of the color coins. They were very flawed, and they were very difficult to actually understand and also trade. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, okay. Because it kind of flickered for a moment there. I didn't know if my Wi-Fi had gone a little bit haywire. Spells of Genesis. Recently, I was on a Telegram auction where this card, it's like a baseball card, but it's a video game card where you have different characters, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, on these cards where you actually trade them. And some of the first Spells of Genesis I've seen go for around $30,000 to $40,000. No joke. So, and also the Rare Pepes was the next evolution. And if you know anything about the Rare Pepes, the guy who actually started cartooning these frogs had a pretty bad rap. They started doing really negative things with the Rare Pepes, putting really negative symbols on these frogs, and they went out into the universe. And the Rare Pepe scientists decided to make it a positive face for inclusion. And there's actually a book on the Rare Pepes that sells for around about $500. I think it sold at auction for $1,000 in 2018, but the average is around $500. And I'm fortunate enough to have a few of those as well. So the Rare Pepe started to evolve. You also need to have Pepe Cash, which is another type of coin that is out there. And Pepe Cash, you can easily purchase Rare Pepes, but it actually has an increasing value as far as a coin goes. So most people know about the CryptoPunks. Now the CryptoPunks, there were 10,000 released, and all you had to do at the time that they were released was go and claim your CryptoPunk. And right before the CryptoPunks was rescuing mooncats. Rescuing mooncats was a game to rescue these space traveling mooncats that were, seemed to be no reason behind it other than to test the Ethereum and test the network. And that's really why most NFTs at that point were created, really, was to see what we could build and develop on the networks, whether they're Bitcoin protocol or an Ethereum protocol. We wanted to build to find out what the resistance was and what the interest was, in fact. And 3-4 years later, now we see a huge interest in rescuing mooncats. And just until recently, there were a lot of mooncats stranded out in space. That recently someone found out that this was a game that was released in early 2017, but not very many cats were actually gone and rescued. So recently, all the cats were rescued because they saw that these were pre-crypto punks, and the crypto punks were going for these extortion amounts, like $7 million. I think recently There was 9 CryptoPunks auctioned at Christie's for, I think, around $18 million. So
can I just jump in here for 1 second? I need to point out, like, I get that this is a real technology and innovation, but I think we can all understand why it's not taken so seriously by a lot of people because of the language. It's got its own vernacular that to the outside world, you're talking about moon kitties. Like,
yeah.
what the hell?
Yes. And I go through all of this just to ease you guys into now where we are with the NFTs and where we are with understanding the beauty of the NFTs and how these beautiful non-fungible tokens and crypto assets of the past have really shaped our future. When a CryptoPunk is sold in Lava Labs or at Christie's, Lava Labs is the creators of CryptoPunks on Ethereum. John and Matt didn't think about the royalties on it. They really wanted to create something fun to figure out if that's what people would be interested in. And then came along the CryptoKitties. So CryptoKitties, they say that it nearly broke Ethereum, but what it really did was tested the protocol and the transaction times. So after the CryptoKitties came out, then the banks started to be very interested because it could withstand a certain number of transactions per second. And we needed something to be built on the Ethereum protocol to actually test the performance of the protocol. And the CryptoKitties really put it to the test. And they really it really shed some light on things that actually needed to be resolved and refined in the community. And then eventually around in 2018, we started to see that the royalties wasn't actually built into the ERC 721 token. And you could trade anything and not have the royalties embedded. So that's why we wrote the Ethereum Improvement Proposal, the EIP 2981, to allocate and tag the royalties. So if I sell a piece of art on Super Rare, for example, and my collector actually collects that NFT on Super Rare and wants to go and sell it on a different protocol or a different platform, even on the same protocol. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are 2 separate protocols. If you want to buy something on the Ethereum protocol and you want to go and sell it in a smart contract with Stacks, for example, on the Bitcoin protocol, your royalties are not going to follow that piece of art. And same thing with the platform. If I buy something on Super Rare and I go and I sell it on a different protocol like OpenSea, for example, unless OpenSea has a respect to that ERC 721 token, I can't expect the artist to get paid their royalties. It does not automatically follow. And I think that's a misnomer with a lot of the crypto assets and NFTs out there, that once it's bought and the second time it's sold, then the artist automatically gets, because it's minted on a blockchain, that they automatically get their royalties, which is not true. So anybody out there who is interested in doing anything with NFTs needs to ask the right questions. If you're an artist or providing a platform, then really there has to be, and the standards for the platforms are evolving, but interoperability between different protocols is still something that hasn't really been refined yet. So the reason why I went through all of that is to give you guys at least a taste of what has actually been created and why it's been created. And it does have funny names so that people can remember them. And also the community is kind of, they have a good sense of humor when they're creating these NFTs. The explosion of the NFTs and the popularity of NFTs have really catapulted in the last year and a half, really. The Bitcoin halving, I don't know if you guys want to Google that. If you don't know what that is, it's really important especially with the price differences in crypto from one year to the next. It really does have an effect on Bitcoin. the Bitcoin pricing. And then that drives interest for other tokens, for example. But that happened last May. And then after that, the NFT market just went crazy. People had a little bit more cryptocurrency to spend. And so they were spending it on really NFTs that they thought would increase in value. For example, I bought an NFT in early 2020 for I think $17,000, and recently I was offered $135,000 for it 1 year later, which is crazy, but it was a one-of-one NFT. Sometimes you can do editions on different platforms, but this one was a one-of-one, and it was by one of the OGs, the original gangsters of the NFT space, the original guard. So if we want to go to the next slide, Lisa. Mm-hmm. How am I doing for time?
You're good. I ran a little late, so you're fine.
All right, cool. So things to consider, and I put this, and I do apologize. There are many other protocols out there. I think the most protocols that the protocols with the most amount of developers, number one would be, I think, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I just use those, and those are the ones that I'm most familiar with. I know there's Hyperledger Fabric out there. My friend John Walper was one of the founders of Hyperledger Fabric, so I always have to give him a mention. When he was working for IBM, they really worked very diligently to make sure that they have an offering and a service offering around that, especially because they have a whole cloud offering behind that as well. They didn't need to go to like the Microsofts of the world to partner with them for their cloud services offering. So the protocol that I'm going to kind of talk about here is really Ethereum. Minting something on Ethereum mainnet is right now slightly expensive because the price of Ethereum is very high, or price of ETH is pretty high in comparison to what it was a year ago, for example. And then if you want to mint something a little bit less expensive, there's a layer 2. So like a near protocol, for example, which will integrate nicely with whatever protocol that you would be using or whatever platform that you're using, the platform of choice. A lot of times when you do mint through a layer 2 protocol, remember your royalties won't follow you. So you have to think about that, but you also have to think about security when you are minting or buying something on a layer 2. The token that I always tell people to think about is an ERC 721 with an EIP 2981 wrap. So that makes it sure that your royalties, if you are selling on a specific platform that's your NFT is minted on the Ethereum protocol, then that EIP, the improvement proposal 2981, will help you have your royalties minted and automatically allocated to you when you are selling, or your collectors are selling on the secondary sale. You have to consider the platform, and you have to consider the platform fees when you're minting. And also when you are thinking about minting on a specific platform or through a platform, you have to think about your cross-platform sales, transaction fees, your gas fees. Some people, when you mint your NFT, you pay the gas fees and your transaction fees up front as the artist or the creator. Or you can put your work out there on a specific platform, and then when it's actually purchased, they have a thing called lazy minting. The actual collector actually pays those fees. So you have to remember that when you are actually minting an NFT. That to me, I mean, I always ask questions like that with different platforms. I've advised a number of platforms. I invested in Super Rare, Illospace, also Rarible through CoinFund and a few others. And it's really important to ask those questions. I think that Super Rare is probably one of the best. It was the first. It wrote the standards for the NFT market for the platforms.
Can you just define for people that don't know what Super Rare is, what they do?
Yeah, so Super Rare was created and thought about by two brothers, John and Charlie Crane, and they have a third co-founder, which I've forgotten his name. Sorry. They started a marketplace for NFTs, and they sell on behalf of the artists. They create a marketplace and they sell on behalf of the artists NFTs on their platform that are one of ones. And you sign up to superrare.com and you sign up through a MetaMask wallet, and you go and you look at the different pieces of artwork that are for sale and you bid on them. And once that bid is accepted, then your piece of artwork, your NFT that you bought, goes into your wallet, and you're able to view that NFT in your MetaMask wallet, for example. So in MetaMask, they have what your currency is, so your number of Ethereum that you have or amount of Ethereum that you have, and they have also a collectibles side where you can actually view your art and then show your art to your NFT art to other people. So and Super Rare has been around since 2007, late 2017. I think they actually got together and started, and then 2018, I think they went live. And recently they did their Series A for a couple, a double number millions, almost a triple number millions. So they've done really, really well for themselves. Thankfully, because that was one of my favorite investments that I really wanted to do really well. But they were one of the first NFT platforms to pitch to Christie's and Sotheby's, for example. Fantastic team, fantastic guys, fantastic platform, and I think they're just gonna go to the moon. They're really fantastic guys. So I hope they're going to do much better than what they already are doing, but they're doing really well now. Okay, so the next thing you need to think about is the royalty percentage allocation on the primary sale. That's the first time you sell your art. And then also on the secondary sale, what kind of percentage you want to get in royalties. And maybe if you wrap it with an EIP 2981, when your collector purchases it, they will respect that and not sell it on a platform where you don't get your royalties, because it's not, like I said, it's not embedded and it's not automatic. Another thing that a lot of artists don't think about is the taxes. They could sell probably, let's just say you sell one piece on an NFT platform per month. When you sell, you need to actually account for the amount of taxes that you're going to have to pay when you get paid for these pieces of art, whether it's sold for $2,000 or $200,000, you still need to account for that. I invested in a company called Gilded Finance. They're based down in New Orleans, who takes your wallet and they place their platform underneath. So anything that comes into your wallet as receivables, then they, at the end of the year, give you a tax and a definition of what your taxes will be. They've also integrated with QuickBooks, and I think that they're doing really well just for the fact that there's a huge increase in NFT purchases. So they're perfect for accountants as well. A lot of accountants come to them and sign up with them because they need to advise their clients on their how much they owe in taxes. And it's easy for them. They just connect the wallet to the platform, and anytime anything comes into that specific wallet, you owe taxes in it. In the United States, I don't know if there's a lot of international folks on this call, but they account for that on a U.S. state level. And Joey's going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. And I think also we probably, Hailey should probably talk about this. Is an NFT a security? I get this question quite a bit. And I think that I'm not a legal person, so I'm going to give that question to her, but that's something that you need to consider when you do think about NFTs. And I hope that gives you guys a good understanding of what to consider and also the platforms. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm available. Ping me on Twitter. I think my DMs are available, and you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for schooling us on all that, Kelly. I think I
Very
have
quick.
even more questions now, though.
Oh, no.
Just because I'm trying to put the hat on of somebody that is coming in cold. Maybe they're a designer on this call or they're creative and they're sitting here going, wallets, fabric, NFTs, like ETH, what? Where do I even dive in? How do I start? What does it mean to me as a creative? So I'd love to introduce our amazing panel, and I'm going to turn it over to each of you to give a little shout out, hello, who you are, what your background is, and then we can dive into the panel discussion. I'm going to hit up Anthony Day first from IBM.
Hey everybody, Anthony Day here. Thank you very much, Lisa, and everybody for the introduction. And Kelly, thank you for the amazing presentation. I learned more about NFTs in the last half an hour than I think I have in 5 years of my career in blockchain. So really, really fascinating. I'm English by background. I have also training in supply chain management, but I live in Dublin in Ireland. I work for IBM, and my focus primarily is to help enterprise clients and governments think about blockchain, decentralization, business networks, self-sovereign identity, provenance, all the various themes of the day. Have been working with tokenization, as we used to call it before we started calling it NFTs, across a number of different platforms, Ethereum. I've worked with Corda, Hyperledger, various flavors thereof, EOS, and a bunch of different stuff. My focus here primarily is trying to help break down how do companies and governments think about tokens.
Fantastic, thank you. And you're coming to us today from where in this planet?
Dublin in Ireland.
Dublin, Ireland. Okay, over to you, Tillman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tillman Holloway. I'm coming to you from Colorado. I'm the CEO of NFT Glee. We're a NFT marketplace built on a second layer protocol, the Liquid Network, which operates off the Bitcoin protocol. And I am an old school miner and know a lot about the hot topic relating to green energy and mining, and proof of work versus proof of stake.
Fantastic. And what are you doing at the BTC Miami event coming up?
We have just launched the first Golden Whale Pass in Miami for the Bitcoin 2021 conference. It's a one-of-one NFT collaboration between 4 artists. It comes with over a minute-long video that we've produced, all original characters. It also comes with a 5 celebrity suite fight night pass to the Floyd Mayweather fight on June 6th, the last day of the conference. It also comes with a swag bag, a digital swag bag that has Dom Perignon and several other things. So it's the one-of-one highest level pass to the conference. And pleased to announce that BTC has sold out all of the whale passes and all of the tickets to the conference. So it sounds like it's going to be a roaring time.
What? Amazing.
Yeah. I heard over 12,000 people are coming.
Yeah, Kelly's going to be there. You two should meet in person.
Absolutely.
Hailey, I'm going to kick it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hailey Lennon. I'm an attorney in the space. I've been working in-house for cryptocurrency companies since about 2014, and recently joined Anderson Kill, which is a law firm in the space. So especially with this sort of boom wave of new NFT projects, we've had a lot of prospective clients coming to us with all sorts of questions about NFTs and how they're regulated, and how companies like NFT Glee can do things in a compliant and legal manner. So excited to talk about this crazy space today.
Thank you, Hailey. And Joey, you're last up. You're popular in the chat, so come on up and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Joey Ryan. I am a co-founder and CFO at Gilded Finance. My background, I'm a CPA. I actually worked in public accounting for approximately 10 years, performing financial statement audits. Worked at Ernst & Young, RSM, some large accounting firms. Discovered crypto and NFTs back in early 2017. really kind of diving into it from the accounting and tax aspects and implications. So kind of went down the proverbial rabbit hole back then, and have been kind of crypto focused ever since. Quit my corporate job and co-founded Gilded shortly thereafter. Kelly, as she mentioned before, is one of our investors, best investor and advisor ever. So we're big Kelly fans as well. She's helped us a lot to get us to where we are today. And yeah, happy to be here. On the NFT side, we are actually, and I was responding a little in the chat, you guys can check us out. We're actually in the midst of releasing a product specifically for NFT artists and small businesses that are going to be dealing with NFTs. We're calling it Nifty Office. So you can go to our website and check out kind of our recent blogs and updates, and you'll be able to see kind of the updates on when we have that released. And that'll be specifically targeted again for artists and small businesses that are going to be kind of utilizing NFTs, and kind of we're going to make it super simple for those businesses and artists to be able to track their accounting and tax implications, and kind of integrate it directly into their existing business operations. So here to talk today a little bit about that. Hopefully I don't bore you guys too much, but definitely feel free to throw questions in the chat. I'll answer them as fast as I can.
I'm very curious about what's the question that you answer the most, because there's so many questions that you could have out there as far as, taxes go. But I'm very curious to know, what is the question that you get asked the most?
Yeah, so on the NFT side, it's primarily, are NFTs taxable? That's from a lot of artists that are just getting into the space and trying to understand how crypto and NFTs work, how they can sell their art online, etc. And I think, obviously an understandable question, right? For people that aren't familiar with crypto or blockchain, and don't know some of the ins and outs, that's definitely a very that's not a bashful question at all, right? Especially if you're new to this. So that's definitely the one we get the most, at least initially, as we're getting a lot of this interest. And as we're starting to guide some of these companies and small businesses and artists through the process, they're getting a better understanding of how this ecosystem works, how they can really maximize their revenue, and kind of create a good kind of business operations, or have solid kind of business operations and a good tax understanding going forward.
Kelly, I kick it over to you to start off the panel, so we can
kind of jumped in already. Sorry.
Yeah, take it away, man.
Fire away.
Away. Well, Anthony, I want to kind of start with you, because IBM is such a huge company, and it's kind of difficult from a blockchain perspective. I think if IBM was my client for many years, I built a lot of the data centers and oversaw a lot of the data centers that that IBM brought on through their partners like JLL and JCI and all of those guys. But it's really difficult for me if you're a blockchain person, I think I would spend my entire days trying to figure out how and what to do first, because there's so much of a huge offering with IBM. So where do you focus the most, and what is the question that you get asked the most?
There's a lot to unpick in there, Kelly, and thank you for genuinely thoughtful questions. I want to make one quick observation before I start around the jargon related to NFTs, and if anyone on the call or anyone on the Zoom call looks back at crypto kitties and Pepes and crypto punks and feels a little bit confused as to why the hell are people paying $50,000 or $500,000 for these things, imagine British people looking at you guys buying baseball cards.
Well,
don't get it. We'll never get it.
I always compare it to when Warhol started silk screening. That was a complete shift in the art market, and there was a lot of criticism, and they were kind of renegades and punks, if anything, of the art world. And so I always try to, when people do kind of look at me sideways when I talk about my rare Pepe collection, and which I should show you guys my rare Pepe collection
I can't wait
anytime.
to see it.
It's fabulous. Then I think that when people kind of look at me sideways for that, I always say, just think Warhol and what he did to Elizabeth Taylor's face, and Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley, and now what's the value of those? Or Basquiat, for example, he had a lot of challenges as well. Keith Haring, I mean, that era of artists is very similar. And recently I interviewed Patti Smith. I'll throw that out there real quick.
Just a casual Patti
just
Smith.
just a name drop. An artist that I work with here in New York, Stephen Sebring, is her photographer. And we did an NFT drop on Super Rare with Patty, with a photograph of Patty, and her eyes. It was just a photograph, but he caught it in a couple of frames, and then he put those together so it looks like it's a digital video. And her eyes are following. So if you think about a Mona Lisa and their eyes follow you on the wall, it's really exciting. But he dropped that a couple of weeks ago, and I interviewed her and I said, so what do you think about this NFT space? What do you think about this new excitement around art? She said, I was waiting for you guys to arrive. The next punk, the next people, the next changers, the next evolution of artists. She said, I've been holding my finger in the dike, and now you've arrived. I've waited for you guys to arrive. So, and then when she said that, it really gave me goosebumps, because she really believes in what we're doing. She might not understand the technology like a technologist, but she gets it. And that to me is really beautiful. So I do compare it that way, Anthony. So thank you.
No, I love it. And I think everything has value to somebody, right? If you're in the right domain, if a Warhol will means everything to somebody and nothing to somebody else. And what we have with blockchain is we have a technology that enables democratization. Anybody can go out there, mint a token, and put whatever they want out there, in the same way that anybody can go and create a cryptocurrency by and large. What you've got to then do is pair that with what is interesting or valuable, because you can make 1,000 NFTs of memes out there, and they'll be as valuable as everyone's portfolio of shitcoins that never made it. So it's where scarcity and the provenance of scarcity and persistence of those assets, and then democratization. If there's a Venn diagram of those things, and then a Venn diagram of communities that value those things layered on top, right? We're now into 2 layers already of this metaphor. That's where this is going to take off like crazy. But people obviously naturally get excited of grabbing up everything that's out there just in case. So I don't know how that's going to play out in the next few years, in the same way that everyone's got, all sorts of random coins that they know will never, ever appreciate.
Can I ask the one question that I know I've always been thinking about, and everyone has said to me, okay, so I buy a crypto kitty or a Pepe or whatever the digital art is. If Kelly shows us her digital art collection and I take a screenshot of it, I now have a copy of her art. And since it's a digital file initially, what do you say to those people that are like, oh, well, it can be easily just replicated?
I compare that to a very dear friend of mine, Bob Gruen. And Bob Gruen is an amazing photographer. And I can walk through Central Park here and see people selling T-shirts that say, with the picture of John Lennon and a picture saying, with him wearing that T-shirt that says New York City on the front of it, in front of where he lived. And so I kind of compare it to that. You still don't own the original. And provenance is important, and especially in the blockchain space, whether you're tracking NFT art or whether you're tracking fisheries off the coast of Vietnam, you're still in that space of provenance and IP, and understanding where the original place of origination is. And so I think that's what I compare it to. But anybody else have a different opinion? I would really.
Well, I would add to that. One of the features of our whale pass, for example, is a perpetual whale pass to any of the Bitcoin conferences forever. So real world access tied with NFT images bolsters the ability for it to be forged. It's not just at that point about the image itself, about the video that we produce. yes, you are the authentic, original, one-of-one owner of that piece of art, and you get to reap the benefits of the appreciation of that. But you also have access to those conferences from this day going forward. So there's built-in real-world value there. And so my point would be that we are in its infancy. The amount of change that we will see happen in the NFT space, in my opinion, over the next 12, 24 months. I've been waiting personally for something to penetrate the common household, if you will. You know, crypto, Bitcoin, it's the king, obviously. I've been in it for a long time. I love it for what it's intended for. But as big of a pump as we saw from a marketing and a media coverage perspective in 2017, we still didn't get into every home. And I believe NFTs gets us into every home. And so I think the amount of adoption, I think the amount of innovation in this space is going to alleviate a lot of the concerns, if you will, of counterfeits and forgeries and those types of issues.
So here's the beautiful segue into the original question that Kelly asked that now builds on the point that Tillman just made. Is the question that I get asked, but let's stick to NFT specifically, is NFTs only for art? Right, and the fact is it isn't. Right, if what we're looking at is we've got a token ability to tokenize the ownership, the holdership of a particular anything. That could be a commodity, it could be a credential, it could be a piece of artwork, it could be goods and services, it could be collectibles, it could be a piece of real estate. Right, the ability to hold digitally the ownership right or an access right. Two separate things, right? And I know Hailey's going to come in on the kind of legal differences of this, but think of the concept of tokenization as entry to systems in the IT landscape. Giving somebody a token to access, to log in to a system was available for decades before this. It just wasn't on a blockchain. The same concept of passing through or entry or access or receiving access because of owning a token, whether that's your whale pass or whether that's related to machine transactions or to autonomous vehicles. That's your every home, but that's your every home in every transaction, in every vehicle, in every domain where somebody has a digital wallet. It won't necessarily be a MetaMask wallet, but that part of the industrial side of tokenization, that's the thing that we need.
Yeah, Hailey, I would love to hear your thoughts on what Tillman said and a little bit about what Anthony said, because I think your perspective, at the end of the day, really what matters in this world is the regulations and legalities around this and taxes. I mean,
it takes the fun out of it for a second, but yes, I agree with you. I mean, when a client comes to us and starts describing how a NFT will function and what it will be giving an individual access to, you have to start thinking in terms of the intellectual property attached to it, what rights are really being transferred and by whom, and ensuring that there's no sort of infringement through that transfer with the NFT. And the other side is under securities law analysis. We've seen a lot of these projects that aren't just sort of gaining access to a project, but that are more being used, in the crypto space called ICOs. They're really functioning more as a fundraising tool. And in that case, you start to get under security law analysis. So, the SEC themselves have made comments that NFTs are, as non-fungible, would be less likely to be a security than some of these other sort of ICO projects out there. But if the true reason for the NFT is fundraising, at the end of the day, it still has to go under that same, I don't want to get too technical, but there's a Howey test analysis that the SEC relies on, and it's a 4-pronged test. And then if an NFT falls within that, it would be considered a security and require that registration. So, there's the projects in this space, especially Tillman's, that, like I'm closely interested in, I see a lot of value in, and unfortunately projects have to sort of pause and enlist the help of legal experts and tax experts and sometimes tech experts to actually make those projects a reality. But it's all doable, and it's
well, Hailey's actually my attorney, so I'll tell you this. That's where it all starts. Everybody has great ideas. None of them really make it to market before you go to a person like Hailey and get them to weigh in on, where the bumpers need to be, because it's an expectation of return. So if you're casting an expectation of return, that's an investment. That's not a piece of art.
Yes. My next question would be just to ask Anthony. There's a huge amount of IP in IBM, and how do you think that the IP is going to be utilized in that threshold? And obviously, there's a lot of lawyers that work for IBM, and I think that we need to look at the huge IP players and how they're going to be disrupted with this new technology.
So it's super interesting. I mean, I had this conversation this morning with Keir Fenlow Bates on a separate call. If it's about NFTs and the role of NFTs or tokens in relation to IP, I think it's super interesting, because if you look at things like the US Patent Office, they are heavily centralized, not particularly progressive, and probably don't want to cede any control around transfer of ownership rights of patents, for example. On the other side, if you look at work that we're doing with IPWE in the US, we're looking at trying to create fractional ownership of IP. And so not non-fungible tokens necessarily, more fungible tokens, so you can create shared ownership. I don't know if anyone ever brings up the Beeple example, but it's always one of my favorite ones. It's an NFT that's actually backed by fungible tokens because it was bought by a fund. So that's one where I think you're unlikely to see governments ceding that control and decentralizing, but there is still an opportunity to pass rights for IP, because you can digitally track the royalties of that IP in a non-blockchain world, even in a blockchain world. But again, anyone who's tried tokenization of music knows that that's one of those spaces that just doesn't want any control ceded whatsoever.
Absolutely. I think anybody with a large amount of IP really doesn't want to hand over that. And like Mayweather, for example, Tillman, how did you guys get past the IP rights? Maybe I should ask Hailey that, but it's interesting, people's image is an IP for some people, or a label, or voice. Is it the written word? Is it the sung, if you sing a song, if you're under a label, then you can't, even if it's a cappella, if somebody's recording it, you can't go out there and do anything with that. And you have to be pretty careful. So I'm very curious about Mayweather.
So we don't have a partnership with Mayweather. So the distinction is that we purchased a box for the fight, and that comes as a benefit to buying that NFT.
Okay.
So there's no official affiliation. Mayweather is officially affiliated with BTC Conference, with the Bitcoin Conference. He's a speaker there now, I think announced a couple of days ago. But anything that you purchase and add as collateral, if you will, to the NFT is yours to market as it's as what the deliverable is, not as a partnership with the brand.
Which is a fantastic NFT in itself. There's so many use cases for NFTs. I remember in 2017, Block Apps advised a company called Upgraded on their blockchain build for ticketing system. And a year later, Ticketmaster came and bought them. And we were really excited because we thought Ticketmaster was going to start doing blockchain tickets and, visibility and NFTs and all this kind of cool stuff. We were wrong. But that goes back to really the IP that is wrapped into that. And Joey, do you see any kind of IP challenges with accounting, or do you see any, when you pay invoices to employees, is there any kind of IP or law that you guys watch out for when an artist wants to pay their employees in crypto, for example? And I know that's a very far-fetched, but I know that there's a huge segue there. And I'm just curious to hear your opinion on that, trying to understand the IP with tax and artists for NFTs or any kind of IP, because the NFT, like the box, for example, that's not art. I mean, some people call it art, but it's a beautiful way to utilize an NFT mechanism, or an NFT in itself, not just a mechanism, but the NFT to actually tag to that experience.
Exactly. Yeah, and to just to build on that for a second, like, so everybody understands, an NFT, just everybody knows, or hopefully we all know, or if you don't, it stands for non-fungible token, just meaning that it's a one unique token or encrypted token on the blockchain, right? So it can be anything. It can be, as we talked about tickets. It can be a tokenized version of a physical property, right? So you're going to see going forward where because it's going to be a lot easier to transfer rights, et cetera, you're going to see real estate, both commercial and residential, starting to be tokenized. As when you hear tokenized real estate, those are NFTs, right? Because it's each individual real estate plot is a unique token per se, or has their own unique contract associated with them, right?
Yeah,
so
I see the whale pass box as real estate.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's not just art that we're talking about, or music, right? So there's digital representations of physical goods. That's one. When I start with NFTs, I say let's simplify it into two buckets. One, there's actual digital a NFT is a digital representation of like a digital artwork or digital piece of music online, right? It's just digital. There's no tangible good associated with it. You're buying the Beeple art creation, or any kind of piece of art that's sold that's digital and super rare, any of these other platforms, right? And then the other bucket is, again, these kind of digital representations of physical goods. So you're talking about commercial and residential real estate. You're talking about the whale pass, et cetera, where it's an actual experience or a physical good that you own, right? So when we're talking about that, when you're talking about transferring those and using them as, and that's where it becomes interesting, right? Is because, like, typically, if I can tokenize like my house, like typically people aren't like selling their house because of the legal paperwork or legal contracts that go into basically buying and selling property like that, right? You're talking, thousands of dollars spent on legal work just to transfer or sell a house. So for goods like that, where it's cars, houses, large physical goods, well, now if you can tokenize and make these tokenized NFT assets, now you can freely transfer these with by minimizing a lot of these costs, right? So think about really what opens up. You can have fractional ownership shares, et cetera. So when you're transferring all of this, at least from and that's just the general NFT perspective. When you're talking about from kind of the accounting and tax perspective, right? At least in the United States, the IRS treats all cryptocurrency, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, any fungible token, which is what Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a lot of shitcoins are, which are fungible tokens, or non-fungible tokens, NFTs. They're all.
I think we call them altcoins these days to be sensitive.
Yeah, I always get a nice ruse when I drop that in, but whether it's a fungible token or a non-fungible token, the IRS kind of umbrellas these as property, right? Meaning that it's treated as property. So similarly, what I tell people that are trying to understand this is, it's just like if you were to sell your house or sell your car to somebody else. Like, think of the tax implications that go with that. So when you're transferring any sort of NFT or any cryptocurrency, if it's something that you're selling or buying, there is a taxable impact on that. So if you're paying employees, going back to what Kelly was talking about, if you have some sort of IP or taxable event associated with paying employees, right? The IP in the NFT, the ownership, right, changes hands from I guess the employer to the employee. If you want to pay your employees in NFTs, there's a whole valuation aspect around that, but you can pay your employees in specific NFTs or cryptocurrencies, and those create kind of taxable events as well.
That reminds me of when I was I used to work in Nigeria, and I would go to the market and I would have people approach me and they would say, I would go and like try to get vegetables or fruit in the marketplace, and then I would have these artists come and approach me, and they would say, okay, I have this art. If I trade you this art, will you buy me some vegetables from the stall? And I'm like, okay, so that's kind of a bartering system, and same thing as an NFT. I mean, very easily you can actually pay your employees in NFTs if you wanted to, or you could pay your employees in a Mayweather fight, for example, if you have that well pass. I'm sorry, Tillman, I keep plugging your NFT Glee, but yeah. So my next question is for you, Joey, is when an artist actually pays their employees real quick, what does that mean to the employee? Does the employee actually have capital gains tax on it? And how do they know what capital gains tax they have to pay if they're paid in crypto or an NFT? Just real quick.
Yeah, so just the quick, easy scenario is, if there's an artist, so it's a very small business that has 1 or 2 employees and they're minting NFTs on a platform, Super Rare, OpenSea, whatever. We'll plug Super Rare since Kelly invested in them. If they're minting, if they're minting NFTs on Super Rare and they sell, they sell an NFT for let's say $20,000, whatever that is, 5 ETH, 10 ETH, 10 ETH ish, and they get paid in 10 ETH, right? So the business gets paid in 10 ETH, and then if they're going to pay their employees in ETH or whatever crypto that they receive, typically right now it's ETH on these platforms, that becomes taxable income, just like any other type of income that the employee would receive in exchange for their services that they're providing for the business. So if they're a W-2 employee, obviously, you're at least, again, this is all, let me clarify, this is all in the United States. If you're a W-2 employee in the United States, your taxes are going to be kind of taken out of your paycheck per pay period. If you're a 1099 contractor, obviously you're responsible for reporting and properly sending your prepayments to the IRS quarterly. So it's important to basically understand that, yes, it is taxable income, right? It's just like if you're receiving dollars, even if somebody was to like say, hey, as going back to the barter system, I'll give you my car if you work for me for 6 months, right? Like and you agree on a fair value price of your car, say it's $20,000, whatever it is, that $20,000 or that car is taxable income to you, right? Because again, you may not be receiving like actual dollars, but you're receiving something that has a fair value associated with it. So same here, it's taxable income. You report it at the end of the year, and you have a cost basis associated with that. So if you then sell that Ethereum for dollars, or cashing out, or use that Ethereum to buy other goods and services, there will be like capital gains or losses associated with that, right? Because when you receive that I cannot talk today. When you receive that Ethereum at a specific point in time, it's going to have a specific fair value. Again, if it's, let's say as an employee, you receive half of the $20,000, so you got $10,000 in ETH. When your employer paid it to you, it was worth $10,000 at that point in time. Price of ETH goes up and down every second. So let's say 3 days later, you sell a portion of that, or use a portion of that to pay for rent. There's going to be a capital gain or loss associated with that if your price of ETH went up or down.
Oh.
And if you're not careful, every time you swap for another token as well.
Exactly. Yep.
Tillman, tell me about NFT Glee, and tell me how NFT Glee, I love the name. It's very, very exciting.
Thank you.
Just to go from tax to what your platform is, it's like a really smooth transition of mine. Thank you very much, Joey, for that explanation. I know that's really, really difficult to explain in a very short amount of time. And people ask me all the time, like, tell me about Bitcoin. And I'm like, in 20 minutes or 12 years that it took me to learn about it. But Tillman, tell me about NFT Glee.
We've focused on building a bridge to real world goods and services. We want experiences and physical goods to be integrated into the NFT space. And I'm I'm a big believer in access tokens, and I think that all ticket sales, for example, in the future, if you just look at that space alone, it would provide, if you put it on an NFT, it would provide a tremendous revenue opportunity for the publisher well in advance of when tickets traditionally go on sale. So you could start publishing them years in advance. And there's now a market for the speculative interest attached to that event when it takes place. So we're really focused on the real world aspects attached to NFTs that we can pair with them, and making sure that, again, the focus of integrating blockchain technology and cryptocurrency into every household is as easy as possible. And so back to, really what drove me into the space was when I saw the opportunity to have a conversation. I have had more people in the last 6 months contact me about NFTs than they have contacted me about the bull market that we're in.
Wow,
Right?
that's incredible. And so is NFT Glee specifically focused on ticketing, or are you focused on all things that can be from a physical to a digital, anything that can be NFT?
We are focused on real world use case. We are focused on any way in which we can partner with real world brands and really make a bridge again into the more traditional side of fashion, traditional side of ticketing, traditional side of sports. We want to show how versatile NFTs can be. And yes, artists are the ones that really, the second group, I would say, to latch onto NFTs. Coders were the first group. That's why you, in my opinion, you see the crypto kitties of the world, is because if you go into any, coding department of any big company, you will see that every single one of those coders is a fan of that type of art, right? And so they catered to themselves, just like I think earlier Anthony was talking about the different segments of the market and how they're all going to cater to themselves based upon what they're trying to achieve. And I think the second wave was artists realizing that they weren't powerless in terms of platform and in terms of negotiation, right? Because it provided them a simple solution to plug into that took care of all of that back end. And it would be a similar scenario to where an NFL athlete not needing an agent anymore to go negotiate with the NFL, right? That's how powerful that is for artists. And so if you look at what artists are desiring right now, they're desiring exposure and they're desiring appreciation for the things that they have created and that they are going to create. And we believe the best median for the world to pay attention to those items being created is to pair them with real world goods and services and experiences that at the end of the day, we're all finite, right? We're all going to die. And we all appreciate living life and experiencing things. And I think that brings NFTs into a relationship with people in a much more intimate way. And so
I'm happy that you said that, because the reason why my platform is called Mint Gold Dust is when we're dust in the wind, you still have your gold dust is here because it's minted on chain. I woke up one morning and I said, that's the name. So I really appreciate that. And I love that. Hailey, I have a quick question for you. When you do mint something on NFT Glee or any platform, for example, is the IP embedded? If you have full ownership of that creation, whatever it may be, whether it's a piece of art or whether it's a piece of music or a house or something that you've made, an artisan object, for example, does the IP need to be embedded in that, or do you have that question quite a bit? And is that minted on chain with that smart contract or that NFT?
Yeah, so it can, and it is a question we get a lot. I mean, as you can hear from even just Tillman's company and some of the projects we're all involved in, like an NFT can look and be many different things. So when we have a client come to us, our questions are, you know, what rights do you have? What rights are you wanting to transfer? And really try to document it in a way where it's more of a template and it's repeatable for the client, so that a client's not coming to us every other day with a new song or a new piece of art or a new sport memorabilia, and having to charge them more to do work product. But that question is really more for the client or the project itself to decide. There are ways in which the IP and the transfer of ownership can be and is embedded or tracked on the blockchain. But there are ways in which it's still sort of paper contract agreements, and that's where a law firm comes in as well, because understanding those contract terms, are there royalties if once you transfer ownership to someone, if they continue to transfer ownership, does the original owner, you know, sort of continue to know about and be compensated for those continual transfers? So those are all questions that clients come to us with, and sort of determine.
And I'm curious to know how, because I have this question quite a bit, how do I make sure that my royalties are paid to me on the secondary market when a collector or whoever has purchased something from me? Then how do I make sure that if that collector goes and sells it 2 or 3 times to somebody else, and then that person sells it on the 3rd market and that person sells it on the 4th market, how do I make sure that I get the royalties for that? So how do you, from a legal standpoint, how do you answer that question, and how do you make sure that they do get their royalties?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's actually, so my law partner Preston Byrne actually handles a lot of more of the sort of tech and contractual side, and my focus is more on regulatory. But there are ways in which the smart contract can be self-executing and ensure that those royalties are being paid. And at the end of the day, it's also like any sort of royalty payment where you might need to have, you know, legal get involved if those payments aren't occurring. But in general, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, this is a great point maybe to open up some questions, because I see there's a big conversation going on in the chat specifically about just this topic and contracts. I had set out a poll of what do you think is the top use case for NFTs, art, music, digital fashion, licensing, and royalties of digital and or physical goods. Looks like that's the most popular answer, but maybe that category should have been even more broad to just be contracts, negotiating and having any terms authenticated in a contract, because ultimately an NFT is really a certificate of authenticity and ownership.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the beauty of cryptocurrency in general is that the blockchain can document things and keep a sort of ownership log or chain of control. And so that sort of transfer of ownership can be tracked and smart contracts can execute. So it takes, like all sort of cryptocurrency projects, the point is to sort of take out the need for a middle person managing both sides of the equation there.
Is blockchain law yet in your world, Hailey? Is it, you know, if you mint it on the blockchain, is blockchain law, is code law yet? You know, a lot of purists, I should say, in the blockchain space believe that code is law, and even T-shirts have been made over the years. Code is law. So, but in reality, in our real world, code is not law. I don't think yet. But to a certain degree, blockchain kind of supports the law. Am I correct in saying that?
I would say that. I mean, code is a illustration of law, and it's evidence of the ownership and transfer of a coin or of a project. But at the end of the day, things can still be debated, facts can still be, you know, so it's sort of the law, but you can poke holes in it. That's how I would.
It is a really good way of well, codifying activity, process, owners, steps. Anything that's digitized has a historical trail, which is really interesting. But law is still law, and everything is fine until under dispute.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, so we don't talk about the blockchain as like fraud proof, but it makes it a lot harder to sort of change a block or do something that would would make it not a true representation of what has happened. But that doesn't mean it's perfect.
And then you throw into the loop, blockchain is international, and it's not governed by, in the Bitcoin instance, it's not governed by any specific group of people or government. So what law do you follow if it is minted on the Bitcoin protocol, for example? So there's all kinds of challenges.
I've got one for you on that one, Kelly, which is if blockchainers don't necessarily trust the law and the jurisdiction, you can look at alternative dispute resolution. And there is a platform that IBM's been supporting called Proof of Trust, which is designed to be not quite a DAO for alternative dispute resolution, but not far off. And
you have to throw the DAO out there. Now we've just gotten over the NFT definition.
Please explain the DAO. Is it like
You said me to explain it.
Yeah.
Decentralized autonomous. Sorry, go ahead, Joey.
Oh yeah, no. I didn't mean to step in, but the vertical that I use to explain to people that are trying to understand it is just think of like the DAO as a vending machine, where like basically nobody owns the vending machine, but everybody gets to vote on what snacks get to be input into the machine, as well as how often the machine gets maintenance, and then the revenue from the machine gets split amongst everybody who participates in it. So that's like a very simple way to like understand a DAO in like very simple, like, 5-year-old type terms.
What does DAO actually stand for, though? Decentralized
autonomous organization. And in the context I think we're talking about now, Kelly, imagine you replace Joey's vending machine with a jury, right? Yeah. And the jury is the people, and the people are, global, qualified, right? There are some entry criteria to what allows you to be part of the jury. It might be legal qualifications recognized in some way, or it might be an onboarding and KYC process to some extent. But that's the best we've got at this point in time for a blockchain-based blockchain ADR.
And if you're in the United States and you do want to really look into DAOs, in Wyoming, there is a law that DAOs are legal, and they're looked at just the same as an LLC. You have to have one representative that is actually the face of the DAO, and you can run your operation obviously legally in Wyoming under a DAO structure or mechanism. And Hailey, have you looked into the different types of opportunities for DAOs and for people to operate as DAOs in Wyoming, for example?
I haven't specifically about Wyoming. To be very sort of blunt, my firm errs on the side of pretty conservative advice when it comes to what is a DAO and when can something actually be decentralized. I think that there's, not to get off the topic of NFTs, but we're starting to see, I think like FinCEN and the SEC and US regulators really starting to question, is something actually decentralized enough to where it doesn't require KYC, to where it couldn't be fundraising and having an investment contract that would put it under the SEC. So, actually when I hear the term DAO or decentralized in general, my like legal, I get prickly and I don't want to, because I'm obviously in the space so that we can make stuff happen and there can be innovation and there can be cool projects. And I think what everyone's talking about, what IBM is looking into is awesome. So I'm not here because I want to be a no person about any projects like this. Unfortunately, in the US, regulators have put the industry and, I'll do a sob story, like lawyers in a tough spot, because sometimes we have to say, look, there just hasn't been that much
innovation.
Progress.
Yeah. Innovation and progress. Yeah.
Let me chime in real quick about the DAO. And this was a discussion that we had with Anderson Kill. Back to the decentralization, right? It's, in my opinion, a DAO is like handing out board votes. Like you're a board run company, right? So everyone at the board table gets a vote, right? And you get a proportionate vote based upon how many shares you own or how many of the native token you represent at the table. Just like if you joined a board of a company, there would be compliance that needed to be done. Like right? That's, you don't just get to say, oh yeah, put me on the board. There's a whole lot of legal stuff that has to go on before you get on the board.
Well,
Same type of gray area exists with DAOs. And I would just put the spin on it like this. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, old oil and gas industry guy. And I will say this: technology progresses a lot faster than gas or oil depletes. So you can always get more and more out of the ground because technology is always changing, allowing you to get more and more out of the ground. And I would say that we are on such a steep curve from a technological progression in the NFT space, in the DAO space, that regulators will catch up, right? There will be a DAO that is approved, but we just don't know what point in the future will that be recognized officially. But the technology is too important to ignore, so it will be recognized.
Yeah, and Caitlin Long, who does a lot of work in this space, lives in Wyoming, and she's worked with the regulators and she's worked with the government in the state of Wyoming to really push the envelope with DAOs. And unfortunately, DAOs have from 2016, there was a big DAO hack, and then they have like a black mark across the DAO name. However, we've moved along a lot since then. And I think she's done a lot of work, amazing work, respectfully to Caitlin, to make that a legal operation in Wyoming. And I think that if you are interested in that, I definitely want you guys to check out what is happening with the DAOs in Wyoming, and also Open Law. Open Law is a great organization. They are on the cutting edge, on the bleeding cutting edge of law. And I think that there's a lot of people that are really looking at pushing the limits and pushing the wall out and pushing the, as Patty Smith says, kicking the amps in, breaking down the walls to make sure that innovation actually happens and that we can change based on the technology that we have at our fingertips to make life a lot easier for us and to be able to operate easier. There's, I always think about living in Nigeria. You can build a wall to keep people out of your compound. And then you can put barbed wire at the top to keep them out even more. And then you can put wild, vicious animals in the courtyard once they do get in, but they're going to figure out how to get in. And that's why banks have built these massive buildings instead of just having your fiat around your waist like they used to on a rope. They built these big vaults to keep their the money in, and now there's no gold there, but they still have these vaults just to make it look like it's secure. So, that's the reality. No matter how we evolve, people will figure out how to break it. That's our natural, that's human nature. But the DAOs, I think, are going to be the next LLCs of the future. We just need to make sure that the laws are right around it, the regulations are right, and everybody's doing things legally. And I think Wyoming's actually really going forward in a way that we should go forward, thinking about all of those different aspects, really leading the herd, really.
I think that, I give credit to the states and the efforts that are being made, and I think it's important. It's important for people to focus on, and I agree with you about the efforts that Wyoming have made. The problem becomes this sort of like state versus federal. It's sort of the same way marijuana is legal in some states, but banks still won't touch it because on the federal level it's not. So it's one thing to be able to open a DAO in Wyoming and have it be recognized as an entity and a legal entity at that. But if the purpose of forming a DAO is to avoid some of the regulatory and legal compliance hurdles that centralized companies and centralized exchanges have to deal with, I think that's where it starts to get tricky, because on the federal level, if all of a sudden one entity is doing the same thing as another, but one's decentralized and one's not, but one doesn't need to have a compliance program, doesn't have to do anti-money laundering, doesn't have to comply with the SEC, it's just uneven. So I think that the future is there. I agree with you. And I think that part of what we're all trying to build is innovation. And it's just important to not get too ahead of yourself to where you're the person, unless that's the sort of cost benefit analysis your company has chosen. being that first person to sort of break it.
Yeah, recently I was talking to a guy who wanted to create a DAO for his hemp company and get payments in crypto, and I was like, whoa, too many. You're pushing a little bit too fast here, guy. So you got to take a step back. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people, a lot of chit chat going on in the chat. I actually wanted to call up Simon, who has been talking about his crypto NFT cargo supply chain use case. Are you there, Simon? Feel free to
Yeah, hi.
unmute yourself, and
I'm here.
there you are.
Yeah, I've been a
Do we
bit
get to
testing.
see your video?
Oh yeah, we can. I just didn't go to the hairdresser.
And that's okay.
You and the rest of us for the last 18 months. It's okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a really nice debate to have with people who are relevant here. I just wanted to point out that we actually built an NFT solution 3 years ago with ERC-721 tokens, and just for transferring the ownership of documents in the shipping industry, where basically they were, for 700 years, they've been told, do not lose the paper document because the shipper will not give you the cargo. And now we're telling them, lose the paper because it's all digital now with blockchain, you're safe. And that's a really tough market, because it's a simple business mind in the shipping industry.
I saw someone tweet the other day that we should start to put our COVID vaccine cards on an NFT, and I mean, that's a bit more debatable, I would suppose.
Yeah.
To some extent, that's what's happening. I mean, if you look at W3C verifiable credentials, they are a form of token, you could argue, that are held by an individual in a wallet. It's not necessarily a MetaMask wallet, but a lot of the health pass platforms have Hyperledger Indian Aries or Ethereum underpinning them. If you look at Accredify in Singapore, so it's happening.
I mean, New York has the Excelsior Pass, which uses blockchain. I don't know which flavor, but basically that's already up and running. It's just not used. So there's, I would say, no traction except at the governor's office. But yeah, in our business, I just want to point out the biggest issue also is how to get all the partakers to kind of have this agreement that, yeah, we now use this platform, we upload documents, encrypt it, tokenize, transfer, and then we trust who owns it. Because in the end, the shipping agent who needs to take care of releasing of the cargo from the ship has to trust the chain of transfer. And that's how to get all the legal entities in all the countries that touch this shipping line process on board. And there's a lot of that going on in that part of the world. I mean, so G7 recently announced that everything should be digitalized. So blockchain is getting some traction also as being one of the digital flavors in business, right? And I think NFT is really important for that.
And Simon, which country are you in? I'm out of curiosity.
Oh, well, our startup is in Slovenia, Europe, but I'm actually here in East Village on Manhattan.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but yeah, so yeah, and
the laws in Slovenia, are they open for platforms and NFTs and blockchain? I'm just curious. I know Estonia is very open.
They're partly open, so but we're kind of present in some other countries too, so it's a combined kind of mashup of business. Right. But Europe is trying hard with blockchain, and they see it as a good trend and opportunity. So wherever we kind of have the chance to open the doors for this industry, we try to. But it's a lot of players in the market trying to slowly raise the bar. So yeah. But for me, it was a lot of new stuff here. I mean, new stuff, really relevant content, information, legal views. And yeah, I'm looking forward to follow all of it.
And what is the name of your platform, out of curiosity?
It's CargoX.
CargoX. Okay, yeah. I'll look out for it. Very interesting.
Yeah. We can establish a connection and exchange thoughts.
I think what's really important with cargo is fashion. And I think that clothing and the provenance of clothing and what factory they're coming out of and what dyes that they use on the clothing is really important to really focus on And I think that's really going to be the big focus with blockchain and NFTs, because you can actually create, and I want to plug Lisa's ReFashion, because on-demand clothing is becoming the future. And the way with Amazon buying MGM the other day, I just thought this is a great way to loop in supply chain. And I've spoken at many supply chain events just because it's so important to the way we interact with the rest of the world here in the United States. And I've lived all over the world, and I know what it's like to expedite cargo in Nigeria, believe it or not. And it's not a very fun experience when you're told that it's not there, when you've been told that it is there. And you take supply chain and you take the fashion industry and the provenance of pieces of fabric and fashion and protected leathers and things like that, and you bring them into whatever country of choice, and you need to know how many you have. And that is often unknown to a lot of these mass suppliers, these big suppliers, and there's a lot of waste.
So this is one we are working on, Kelly, and it's one of those ones where where's the overlap of traditional enterprise blockchain and tokenization and NFTs specifically? Because if you look at regulatory reporting around plastics or carbon or cotton or some of those, typically the reporting format is data. It's send a package of data, whether that be a CSV file, a report. If a regulator is proactive enough to consider being a node on a network, that's fine. But all you're really doing is you're doing a data aggregation and provenance platform. Blockchain is brilliant for that, right? There's any blockchain you choose is going to be good for that. Enterprise Ethereum, Corda, Hyperledger Fabric, doesn't really matter. From an enterprise perspective, what you're using there is you're using a blockchain as a ledger, has a single view of gathering only the relevant information that you need, because even in some cases that master data is sensitive.
And you have to make sure that blockchain has a consensus algorithm, because if it doesn't have a consensus algorithm, it's not a blockchain. And people say that they do have blockchains a lot of the time, and it's not really a blockchain. They actually need to pull in that consensus algorithm, or that mechanism that actually verifies, to make them a blockchain. So if you are looking at implementing blockchain in anything, especially with supply chain, for example, Simon, make sure that you are asking the right questions, which is, what consensus algorithm, what protocol are you using, and does it have a consensus algorithm? Because otherwise, it's just a sped up Kafka database, let me tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
I see that there are, Shlomo maybe has some, Brett, you guys have questions?
I am going to, call on Brett first. Ask to unmute. Brett, hit us up with your question.
Oh, yes. So this has been a very interesting discussion. I was just curious to know if there's any recent developments with NFTs in the food space. It seems like that there was a lot of media and press. I would say, 3 to 5 years ago, but it seems like a lot of that has gotten less. But it seems like that the applications are pretty serious, because at least as a consumer, you get to understand specifically at a very detailed level, what types of ingredients are going into your food, and especially even from a food safety perspective, if there's a recall, it just seems like that the applications are pretty serious. So I was just curious if you guys have any recent developments or thoughts on how this would apply to the food space.
So one of my best friends called me up in 2017, and I apologize if anybody's heard this story before, and his name is Bubba Cook. He's the head of the fisheries for the World Wildlife Fund. And he had one of his best friends who was an observer on a fishing boat in the Pacific, off the Pacific Islands, I believe. He was an observer to make sure that this fishing boat wasn't fishing in illegal waters and fishing for illegal fish that was out of season. And this observer witnessed something he probably shouldn't have, and he was thrown overboard. They believe he was thrown overboard. And so Bubba Cook called me up. His name is really Bubba. He is from Texas. And he's a very dear friend of mine. I've known him since we were young. And he said, I know you know how to fix this, Kelly. And we started talking about blockchain technology. And over the years, the World Wildlife Fund has actually changed the regulations around the fishing industry. So it has gone quiet, but I think it's because they're working. They're working diligently. There's a lot of organizations out there that are really working hard to streamline the blockchain efforts with the food industry. Ripe.io is one of them. I think they're built on Corda, and is a part of this community as well. I think they've come to a lot of the supply chain events. But if you look up the World Wildlife Fund and the fisheries, and also consensus, and obviously IBM has their input in that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, you guys have come a long way with that.
So food trust is being used broadly by a number of large retailers. I'm not going to shill it online. You guys can go check out Food Trust. That's not what I'm here for. The difference there, I think, Brett, is between blockchain and data provenance versus NFTs. Do we need to issue a specific token related to an individual packet of food? Or is it sufficient for us to be able to link the data to a QR code and to be able to scan that? What's the form factor that's going to be meaningful to a customer? Am I actually going to resell, or am I going to look at the circularity of packaging? That's an area where a unique identity related to that packaging so that it can be repurposed for, again, recycled packaging, or in the case of fashion, if a good is then sold on later, to identify it as being authentic, having a provenance, if there've been alterations made to that garment over a period of time. The history of that document that travels with it is useful. But just, I think, be mindful of the difference between the requirement to tokenize versus having provenance of data.
There's an interesting use case. I love fashion. That's my use case of choice du jour. And I think it's so interesting because you have now digital fashion and objects that have digital value only existing in the digital realm or metaverse or gaming or AR, and those same objects can then have licensing and ownership rights to purchase or sell it, a physical version of that same item. And then fashion supply chains are getting even more complex because you have resale and then remaking and repurposing of garments that, after they have worn down enough through resale after resale, they'll be disassembled, the same pieces, and redesigned and remanufactured into a new garment. So just tracking the provenance of fashion is going to become really even more complex and, frankly, even more interesting, I think.
So we now have RFID Thread.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you will the supply chain nerds out here will have seen a whole bunch of different RFID tags and tokens and clips and stuff that Gucci have been putting in bags and stuff like this. But if we can now identify individual clothing from tags or RFIDs that are non-invasive, then the unit of one, or the individually crafted good that can then be identified in future with washable RFID tags and stuff like that, that's where that identity and then being able to track gets super interesting.
Absolutely. And what do you think about MEMS, the micro electrical mechanical systems that, I don't know, does anybody have an opinion on that? Because I've been looking at all types of different tags recently, and I think that anybody that has any information about MEMS, I think it would be very valuable to send me some information, because I've been trying to figure out which one is really the most applicable and easy to use across all different types of industries. So if anybody has any information, I'm asking for information.
I will throw that out to the community through LinkedIn and also in our Slack room. I don't know everyone that was on at the beginning. If everyone that's on now heard that we have an invite-only Slack group, and if you want an invite, hit me up in the chat. Right now, I'm going to open up the floor to Shlomo for his question.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Joey. Good to see you guys again. Hey, and of course, Lisa. So it seems to me, as being someone outside the whole NFT world, that it's easier probably to do a private offering and issue tokens than to go public. So my question is twofold. Number one, is that accurate? And if it is, how long is it before all the entrenched interests make it so darn difficult to do that, and this whole industry is turned on its head, especially from monetization from that perspective?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to throw that to Anthony.
Because you want to make me look awkward. I'm not sure if I have a position on this one. I think if you look at how the dynamics play out, what you have at the moment is you have a platform, predominantly Ethereum, where you've got very, very low barriers to entry in terms of content creation. relatively speaking, higher barriers to entry currently because of the price of Ether. So you can't just mint millions and millions of NFTs without having to pay the price. So to some extent, there is an appropriate barrier to entry. I think with blockchain technology and tokens, you're always going to see, for projects that have value, you're going to be able to raise, and you're going to be able to issue, and you're going to be able to publish on a platform where you're going to be able to get support from the community, because that's what blockchain's about, right? If what you are offering has real world value, or if somebody, even if it's intangible, right? There are going to be people out there like Kelly who will be able to see a diamond in the rough and have enough foresight to be able to fund appropriately or support appropriately projects that should get out there, even if the first iteration doesn't scale. If we're getting to a place where we have CryptoKitties 2.0 and we have 1 million people all trying to launch, I don't know what the shitcoin equivalent of an NFT is, but a shifty, let's call it that. If everyone's out there trying to mint shifties, and there's 1 million shifties on the network, and you can't literally scroll through them fast enough to figure out which ones are out there, then you've got a problem. But
watch the space. I'm going to mint a shifty. I'm going to go and do that today.
I'll do the art.
Just to clarify my question is, if I'm a private company, I do $100 million in sales a year, why wouldn't I just issue tokens against my shares and go public that way every day of the week instead of going to the public markets? And what happens once companies start doing that, and the entrenched interest gets the SEC to push back? How does that backfire in the entire NFT industry? That's sort of what I
can answer that. I'll say this right now: if you are selling a token that represents an investment in something, that's a security, right? And you have to do a Reg D. So you could do a Reg D. You could do a Reg D, but here's the ultimate. This is what I love about a decentralized ecosystem. All cryptocurrencies, it's a pure market. It's supply and demand. So if you create a token for your company, right, but no marketplace will pick it up, what good is your token? The fungibility of it is limited to a cash transfer. You have to meet someone in a coffee shop and give them your that's losing the entire benefit of being on the blockchain. The benefit of being on the blockchain is that it is a trustless remote transaction, right? You can do it over international waters. You can do it anywhere. And so I see the point that yes, anyone can do it for the hype of it, right? And I will tell you,
I wasn't suggesting that. I was saying, if I'm a real company, why would I spend all the headache and bother to go public via IPO if I could do a Reg D, start getting some tokens in circulation, and just continue the market and get it moving?
You wouldn't, with the exception of one thing: which market is going to give you most exposure, right? So if you went public in the traditional markets, how much exposure are you going to have? How much capital are you going to be able to draw from, right? If you go public in the crypto market, like NFTs have gone, they are appealing. It's drawing cash over to that segment of the market. And so it's all about the market, right? It's all about the exposure. It's about how liquid you can make that token. And, if you just think about it like this: what happens to the price of a token when it gets listed on Coinbase, right? Because now everybody can get it, right? And so
that's one of the reasons why people, when they do an ICO and they do have a token, it's a very good point, Tillman, that they do drops and they drop into people's wallets, and I don't recommend that. And Hailey's like, good. That's what we call the shit coins, because nobody wants them. And in order to get listed on an exchange, a number of people in their wallet, they have to have that cryptocurrency in a wallet, and then they get listed on the exchange. So they're really something that people don't really know about or understand the white paper. They don't understand where it's building, but they seem to have received this token in their wallet. And now this token is on an exchange, of a valuable exchange, because they're in all these people's wallets. So they had to give away their tokens in order to get recognition from the exchanges to go onto these exchanges. And I don't really recommend that. So it's a very good point. However, there's a lot of regulations around doing an IPO, and it's very costly. To do an IPO, what do you have to have? A couple $1 million. Hailey, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, your question's good, and I think it's one that a lot of companies ask themselves, and then sometimes they find a law firm that will give them the answer they want to hear, and they do an ICO. And do all of them get in trouble with the SEC? Definitely not. I'm actually working on an article about this right now, just about how I definitely am not looking for more enforcement or bigger fines from the SEC, but companies take that risk, right? Like they raise $4 billion and get fined $1 million or $100 million, and so
We're doing it wrong.
So companies do that. Companies come to us often asking, we have a token, we want to fundraise, and we say, stop you right there, because just because you're making it an ICO instead of an IPO doesn't get around the requirements. The enforcement the enforcement actions and the investigations on a lot of these projects are underway. It's just the SEC moves slow.
They're very similar to SPACs, I guess. In the traditional world, it's very similar to a SPAC almost, but the less regulation is kind of like the Wild West at the moment. Hailey, I didn't mean to.
It's okay. I mean, then companies come to us and they do explore, should we do a Reg D offering? A lot of companies actually come to us and say, we're going to do an ICO, but geo-fence off the United States, because if the project is not based in the United States, the team's not based in the United States, and the investors aren't in the United States, you don't have to deal with the SEC. But if you're in the US and you are doing an investment contract and you're raising capital and you're a project that's increasing the value of that project through your efforts, you're an investment contract, and then you have the same issues.
So when you say ICO, that means Reg D, or it means just like totally just like going on for the.
So the term ICO is just an initial coin offering. So it's putting a token into circulation for the purpose oftentimes is to argue that it's giving people access or utility to their project. But if at the end of the day, what they're really doing is fundraising for their project, the SEC is not gonna, you could call it whatever you want to call it, with whatever technology you want to do it. It's like still has those issues.
But it comes down to what Tillman said, right?
Well, yeah, Shlomo, what I was going to say, and good to see you again. I know we've had this conversation before, but going back to the cafe and the Fairmint launch, right? There's a difference between an ICO and just straight tokenizing like a Reg D 506C offering, right? And that's what we've done at Gilded, where we've tokenized our Reg D offering. So you're following all the Reg D guidelines, where we're accredited investor, right? We're following our accredited investor guidelines and laws within the United States, following all the KYC compliance, and geofencing, right? It's outside the United States, it's under Reg S. So that's the beauty of I think you're kind of molding around that Fairmint style launch that we have, right? Because if you're doing it within the confines of the SEC guidance, right, and you're literally just tokenizing the contract that you're offering as a equity agreement to accredited investors, and being able to, obviously, you have to control the transferability of those rights, et cetera, because there's SEC laws around transferability of equity ownership within those Reg D offerings, et cetera, right? If you can control if you want to say the liquidity pool almost of that offering, right, you're still operating in the confines of those SEC regulatory guidelines. Now, and that's where this future of creating kind of this Reg D offering all online and tokenizing it per se is totally different than kind of the ICO construct that everybody points to. With that's totally not under that SEC regulatory guidance, and would be subject to SEC regulatory like fines or issues, I'm sure, as they would come up. And that's where this whole idea of, yes, if you fall within those rules and you're following those rules, then yes, you don't if you have the right community and you have the right, going back to what Tillman was talking about, you're reaching the right audience, you have the right community, you have the right support, you have the backing and support of people behind you. Why would you IPO if you have access to unlimited global potential for people to invest in your company, and they know enough about you, you have the community, again, the community support behind you, the whole IPO process can go out the window. And I think that's what Fairman's trying to do with the cafe is they're saying, look, we can follow all these guidelines and rules and make it super simple and make it easy for businesses to basically decentralize themselves and become global and open themselves up to a global audience of investors and stakeholders going forward.
So the second half of the question, like,
It's the slow-mo question hour.
Oh, no. I asked the question. I'm saying no one addressed the second part. I wouldn't try to dominate this too much. But so what happens when the vested interests go like, it's, New York Stock Exchange really not that exciting anymore because you don't need them, or are they just another? Is it like Coinbase for coins and New York Stock Exchange, and then you get a whole bunch of other exchanges that show up, and all the people that control the markets now no longer control the markets? Is that really where we're going? And what does the SEC do? Because they're all entrenched over there. Like, just make it difficult. Do we get like a version of Sarbanes-Oxley shoved down our throat? Like, really, like, these are things that I'm really curious about. Not obviously people can predict, but very curious about. And it seems like it will be at some point once this whole movement matures. Someone's going to get pissed off and someone's going to do something about it, it seems.
But yes, I think the Bitcoiners will get pissed off enough to do something about it and decentralize finance completely. So the stock exchange is completely irrelevant, in my opinion, because at that point you can't. And Hailey's like looking, going, oh my gosh.
I'm actually thinking about, I think that the SEC, I think there's people within the SEC trying to figure this out right now, like Hester Pierce, who's been a big proponent of this space, keeps presenting this 3-year safe harbor, which would actually give projects 3 years to sufficiently decentralize. Like, I think they're grappling with these questions too, so they're good ones. I don't think that any regulators want to become obsolete, and I don't think any traditional finance wants to. So it's, there's some power struggles that are going to need to happen. And
in 2000, go ahead. Sorry, Hailey.
No, I think a project should be able to raise money how they want to raise money. I'm not, even though I'm a lawyer, I'm not like in love with any of these regulators or any of the laws that are here. It's just, we're just sort of still having the conversations to see what other directions we might be able to go for the industry.
In 2017, I think it was late 2017, or maybe it was 18. It was the World Series, Game 6, Astros against the LA Dodgers, and I just happened to be in LA at the NSA and Aerospace Engineering building, presenting to the NSC and the SEC and all the other Cs. And I was trying to get out of there because I had tickets to go to Game 6 of the World Series to see the Astros play my team. At lunch that day, there was a bunch of very suited and well-documented people by their medal on their chest. Respectful military officials, and they were listening to us. And one of the generals came and sat down next to me and said, "You really inspired me to go to the dark web and buy cryptocurrency." And I said, or you could just go to Coinbase and then buy it there. You could just download this app and buy it there. So I presented to the SEC and the IRS and the NSA in 2017. So a lot of people think that they're slow to change, but I don't think they're slow to change. They're very good at observing until they make a resolution. And so I think that they're going to come up with something that will fit both worlds. And I think that, I'm a part of the data center community, and they're very much looking at the Bitcoin community like, oh my goodness, now you're the target for this energy consumption. And I always say, like, there's 400,000 ATMs running 24/7 every single day, and nobody's worrying about how much energy consumed there. But also, we have 80,000 or 90,000 brick and mortar banks around the United States, and nobody thinks about the data centers and the 5 nines that keep them up and going, up and running, the mirrors of data centers that are keeping them up and running. But when the data center industry started to pick up, they were the bad guys. They were the dirty guys. And so now the Bitcoiners are now the dirty guys and the bad guys, because they're changing, we're changing the world of finance. And eventually, I think that the governments will have their cryptocurrencies. They'll create their own cryptocurrencies, and even the national currency of, like, the Marshall Islands is a cryptocurrency. So eventually we'll go that direction, but we'll have our own independent currency that will operate within those means. So I think they are changing. I think they're, slowly changing, and maybe we'll have a DAO for the stock exchange one day. I mean, I think that's the way that we will go eventually. I truly believe that, but I'm also a Bitcoiner and an Ethereum head. So, I'm a purist.
So on that note, I think it's a good place for us to wrap up. I would love for each of our speakers to maybe share the weirdest thing that you've encountered in the world of NFT. And go. I'm going to call on you first, Joey. I bet you've seen some weird stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking with, and I'll keep it short because I know we're running out of time. But I'm basically talking with a few musicians that have come to me that are asking about trying to, and they're prominent new musicians here in New Orleans, and they're basically wanting to start release NFTs around their music sound bites. They're asking me how they can capitalize on content production that they're already putting out there every day. So if they're performing, at a festival here in New Orleans, or they're performing at night at one of the concert places here in New Orleans, how we can take that and record it and add it to the NFT cycle. Because one of the things we didn't touch on was why it's why all kind of artists and musicians are going to be jumping on board this is because of the royalties. They now will have access to properly receive royalties on second, third, fourth sales down the line of anything that's produced. Whereas before, royalties were not easily trackable, or were not easily created within the system. So now they can basically monetize on every aspect of content creation that they put out there. So this is not the weirdest thing, but it's probably an interesting thing that I've been approached with and kind of working with separately.
Cool. Hailey, how about you?
Yeah, I wish I could go into more detail with, in terms of some of my clients or prospective clients.
Anonymize it.
Yeah, there's been some interesting song authors, especially of like children's lullabies that that you all would be aware of, sports memorabilia and sports teams. So that's kind of exciting. I haven't actually, to be honest, I don't think the weird, like, sort of silly NFT projects come to get legal advice. So I actually have only, clients or prospective clients that I'm excited about. But yeah, I think some of the organizations that sort of manage sports memorabilia, so sort of things like the Hall of Fame or things like that, I think that those projects are going to come out with some cool stuff.
How about you, Tillman?
I think I wouldn't call it weird, but the most interesting kind of out there, ideas that I'm working on with somebody is they have this concept of, social media is a representation of who you are at the end of the day, or what you're trying to represent yourself as. And this idea of combining NFTs with virtual reality and allowing you to create your own personal museum, if you will, for people to go and walk through and sit in your favorite chair and, have the total experience. I think that's probably the most in-depth out there idea I've heard in a while.
Yeah, we haven't talked a lot about the metaverse and how much building and real estate sales and retail stores and merchandising and experiences are going to be happening, and jobs are going to be happening in the metaverse. And every single piece of that is a monetization opportunity.
One of the first companies I looked at for a banking relationship when I was at Silvergate Bank in like 2014 was Second Life. And as I dug into it, the amount of money people were spending on real estate, and the fact that there's actually some reputational risk because crimes can be committed, in the virtual world, and you can pay for someone to get killed or whatever.
Virtually.
crazy. Yeah. And even with that, we were like, well, that seems reputationally risky. So yeah, the virtual world is crazy. It starts to feel a bit like Black Mirror episode. So we'll see what we start helping happen.
Who did I miss on? Anthony.
So I got out ahead of this one. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, we did a podcast episode called The Roast of NFTs. We did the Roast of Blockchain about a year ago.
I listened to that. It was good.
So I got together kind of an all-star team. We had a lawyer, we had a kind of an ex-product owner, somebody working for Panini who do real world collectibles. So the guy has incredible depth in what makes a legitimate collectible. We had an inventor, an expert in IP, somebody who's got deep expertise in digital twins. And through the course of the episode, we covered off Taco Bell getting into the art business, Eastern European airlines issuing NFTs. Then we got into some very odd territories of sex tapes and then blackmail.
Oh my God.
Tokenizing blackmail of publicizing inappropriate messages. I mean, basically NFTs are dick pics. So if that's something that anybody wants to go a level deeper on, like the roast, not what I just said before that, this is the shameless plug. It's Blockchain Won't Save the World is the podcast. It's the same on YouTube as well. So you just type in Blockchain Won't Save the World. There's a whole roast of NFTs. So for an hour, you'll hear experienced blockchain people taking the piss out of NFTs. So and there's some legitimate learnings in there too. So go check that out.
That was amazing. Bye, Hailey. And Kelly, you. What's your weirdest thing?
Everything to me is kind of relative, but I just wanted to touch on the metaverse. Illa Space is building out our reality with AR and VR. And I really, truly believe that the Pokemon of the metaverse is really important. And when you can go and look for art in our reality and gamify it, I think that's really important. Instead of building out a metaverse and inside a game and playing a game, that's great for some people, but I'm a really active person. I like the outdoors. Obviously, I'm here at the beach. Not really, just kidding. It's a background. But I like being outside and out and about. And I think building out our reality is really important. Then you start to pay attention to what's happening around you. And I think that's really important for kids. But one really, really odd thing, 3 years ago, I was invited by a very known British bag manufacturer, a very niche bag, and they provide bags for the Queen. And for many years, their bags are well into the 50, 100,000 range. And the owner and chairman invited me to come and talk to him about NFTs and smart contracts for bags. And so we got into maybe 2 or 3 hours into me mapping it all out for him so he could understand it, and then how we could apply it to their technology stack, which was in the fashion world, it wasn't very advanced.
I'm shocked.
Data center world. But at the end of it, as we were walking out, he said, So I buy a lot of bags for my wife from the company and from other brands. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's nice. I mean, really, this is my bag. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that's my bag. And so I don't really invest in like very, very expensive bags. Thankfully, I don't have that. I invest in like technology. So anyway, so we're walking to the elevator, and he said, Can I track the bags? Can I track the bags that I own? And I said, well, you could. And he said, well, in my portfolio of bags, could I track the bags? And I said, well, that's interesting. Do you carry the bags? And he said, no, my wife does. And so I just kind of looked at him in the elevator, and as we were saying goodbye, that was sinking in. And I was like, oh, that's really, really weird. So when you talk about GPS tracking devices for high-end bags, you also have to remember there's a human element that maybe that bag doesn't want to be tracked,
Yeah, people don't realize that anything that sends and receives signals is part of our the wireless graph. And yeah, and whether or not you think you're actively opting into that, you are, because your phone is sending and receiving signals when it comes into contact with another beacon or anything that's sending and receiving signals. every action you take throughout your day is being tracked on this new wild west of data graphs of all of our signals.
That was probably the weirdest experience I had. I mean, I come across as slightly boring in that case, but that one really drove home to where now 3 years later, I'm still thinking about it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do think that we do need to think about that, especially with these RFID tags for our clothing and MEMS and things like that, QR codes, et cetera, that do transmit and communicate.
Yeah, I think for me, the weirdest things I've seen recently, I read in an article, I didn't experience it personally, but Charmin did an NFT of toilet paper because, why not? And then some athlete sold real estate on her arm, and she will tattoo whatever the person that buys it wants on her arm.
Well, great. That's really strange.
Yeah, so there we go.
The wonderful thing about building out the reality, just real quick, is when you do have a NFT sitting in our reality and you go collect it like a Pokemon Go as an NFT, top of the Empire State Building, or crossing Tower Bridge, not London Bridge, but Tower Bridge, and this beautiful Tower Bridge is right above you, and you can get a message as in an NFT. You go and collect it in your reality as an NFT, and it's sitting there, and you can go and listen to a message from somebody that had been there 5 years prior. I think that kind of new way of actually transacting and engaging with people is a beautiful thing, not just in the games and not just in the metaverse that they are building out right now. So if we could really focus on building out our reality and making it beautiful, I think that the world will be a better place.
The Pokemon Go elevated to art, and I personally want the Pokemon Go of fashion, where I am chasing down the coolest new drops, and we just may be working on that very soon.
Yay!
Yay. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been such a lively conversation, and I'm sure we could talk about this for days and days, but I hope everyone got their answers to their most pressing questions. And if not, hit us up on the worldwidesupplychainfederation.com or reach out to me or Brian, my co-founder, and we will add you to our Slack group where you can continue the conversation with our amazing, brilliant community. So thank you so much for moderating today. Kelly, you were amazing, as were all of our panelists and guests.
Thank you, guys, and thank you very much for putting up with my questions. Sometimes they put everybody on the spot. If anybody's going to be in Miami for the Bitcoin conference, the 4th and 5th, Tillman, you know the dates. I'll be there as well. I'd love to meet up with you, Tillman. If anybody else is going to be there, hit me up.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Yes, you too.